All right. Keep going.
So I say it's wrong, and what's wrong about it? Nothing. There's nothing wrong in the book. I still believe it. I still teach it. What's wrong is what's not in the book.
Mm.
I don't talk about the destruction of the environment in order to get the materials to make those beautiful, wonderful products that we love. And products of all sorts, from automobiles,
Mhm.
cell phones, to even your pencils. And second, I don't talk about the impact we have on culture and how we're destroying culture through our digital products. Now, the people who make digital products say, well, you see, I don't worry about manufacturing because digital products are digital. No, digital products run on physical
Mhm.
products and they use a lot of energy. And now, as we move towards AI, they use a tremendous amount of energy. And where does it come from? And so, um, but the difference, we've also destroyed cultures with this notion of being addictive. We used to teach that in business schools. I used to teach it. Making a product addictive was a good thing. People stayed with your product. Isn't that nice?
Mhm.
And anyway, this is what the book is about. And I believe that the basic flaw in the world is the economic system, which was imposed by the West, the Western countries, which actually is any technological country today. By the way, there's an aside because I've been learning Spanish and I'm using a program called Duolingo.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about Duolingo is all those tricks to make you stay addicted to the product are used by Duolingo. That they brag about it. They tell you which tricks they're using. Continual reinforcement, cheering you on. Hey, Don, you've used us for 87 days in a row without stop. Keep going. You'll get a prize when you reach 100 and all that. Um, I'm amused by it because it's exactly the same things I'm saying is wrong. But in this case, it's really good. It
A,
actually does work on me, even though I know the behavioral science behind it. And so that's
a
like
lot
all
of the weight loss programs do that. They do exactly the same thing. They gamify,
they
cheering you
gamify.
on, right?
That's
As you
right.
lose.
So it's like technology in
Mhm.
general. You can't really say technology is good or bad because it's almost always both.
Yeah, I mean, it's how do you use to use the technology? Would you like to make nuclear power or blow something up, right? I mean, it's a it's the application, right, that actually counts of the tech or the underlying science. So because you're going to all these different places that you talked about before, around the planet, is it all in the service of design for a better world? Is it spreading the word? And you're getting invited to talk about this, or are there
Uh,
other reasons for wa wandering the planet?
the answer is yes. So
Mhm.
first of all, in this book, the subtitle is very important, which is humanity centered. And so
Okay.
uh, the goal is to spread the principles of humanity centered design across the world.
Okay.
And to do that end, a group of friends insisted that they start a charity under my name, the Don Norman Design Award, that it's a 501c3 nonprofit. And what we did the first year was we gave awards to people just starting out who are doing really good things for society. They had to be one of the 16 societal goals of the
Mhm.
United Nations. Um, Actually, we are doing the number 17. Number 17 is that because these problems are huge, we must all band together. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going around the world talking to people, trying to join up with organizations that are already trying to do good societal products. And also, I have now about 25 advisors from around the world, many of them from Africa and India and China and Asia and Latin America. And I'm meeting with them. And I'm really trying to say the prizes are the small part. The bigger part was the meeting that we had once a year. We had one in November in San Diego, where we brought in aid agencies to talk and explain where they went wrong, where they had trouble. Because most practitioners, when they go to a meeting, they like to say, isn't this wonderful what I did? I did this and I did that. But you
Mhm.
don't learn anything. You learn when they say, we're very experienced. We've been doing this for many years. The Aga Khan Foundation is my prime example. And here's where we failed. And this is what we learned from that failure. And it's usually not that they did something wrong, it's that the complexity of dealing with communities and the politics of each different country and each different section of the country makes it really very, very difficult often to do this. And it's important to know that and to know how to work. So that's why I'm traveling the world. The reason I might go to South Africa is because there's a branch of the D school, the design school, the started in Stanford, and it was funded by Hasso Plattner, who was one of the founders and CEO of SAP, who thought design was too important and that he wanted to get better design. It was called the Design Thinking School. And there's now one in Potsdam, Germany, which is where SAP is located, or close to where it's located, and now in Cape Town, South Africa. And we've been talking to them and we want to partner with them because the kind of work they're doing is highly related. And I'm going to Italy in a couple of weeks and I'm going to meet with lots of people there again for the same reasons. And some of my advisors are from Italy. And I'll be meeting with them because, what I'm doing is relatively small. So all these projects by early career people, they don't have to be young. They just have to be early in their career. They're relatively small, almost by definition. But what I want to do is to spread this notion of humanity-centered design, which is human-centered design as in the design of everyday things, plus more. And the plus more is what I said before, thinking about the environment, thinking about cultures, thinking about the way when you go to a community, you do not tell them, hey, this is the answer to your problem, but you help them, to build their own solutions to the difficulties they're facing. And that can actually expand exponentially because we we're an educational institution, and education is a thing that can expand things exponentially because I teach people, and each of those people teach others, and each of those others teach others, and pretty soon you can do a huge amount of positive good.
I, I find it interesting that you've come to the conclusion that rather than trying to reward and make visible the exemplars, for people who have, as you said, I know how to do what I'm doing, right? That you're focusing on seeding the next generation of people and identifying talent a lot earlier with this initiative, right? And that seems to me to be exactly the thing in business that is, it is the domain of the angel investor, right? It's the person, who is saying, I'm going to provide a little bit of capital and I'm going to get you started. Other people will take you, further later, but I'm going to take risk. I'm going to take the risk, right? That you're going to be really good at what you do. And I see the potential. That kind of feels like the domain that you're in squarely.
It is, but the problem is indeed funding because
Mm-hmm.
on the United States, the aid, two of my advisors have been fired. One worked for the CDC, the Center for
Mm-hmm.
Disease Control, and the other one worked for a big aid organization in Washington where it got most of its money from USAID. And um, but so what we are doing is a bit more than you said, because yes, we give monetary prizes to the early career people, but I
Mm-hmm.
also want to spotlight every organization that's doing this kind of work. So
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to partner with groups like Design for Good, which is in Europe, and maybe some design. There's a group called, oh, I always forget the name. It's an Italian group that uh, is actually educational. It tries to find educational institutions around the world that are doing this kind of work. It was started by a friend of mine, Ezio Mancini, who was a professor
Mm-hmm.
Politecnico in Milan.
Yeah, I've
Nice.
actually had a chance to meet him one time. That was pretty cool.
In fact, I will meet him. He's going to come to Florence to meet me on my trip.
Yeah, give
I
my
do,
my best.
and I know him anyway. But also the D schools I want
Hmm.
to partner with, and I would like to list. We part of our so what we do is we have a contest. If you, it's not a contest, a recognition of educational institutions that are already doing this work, and that's not a contest. Anybody who fits the requirements, and all they have to do is be teaching any version of humanity-centered design. It could be called many other things. Or, in addition, though, the main thing they must have is evidence. And the evidence is simple. Give us the names of 3 to 5 students who are actually out there either doing these kinds of projects or teaching others to do these kinds of projects. And so the first year, we only were able to list a few schools, in part because we got lots of wonderful applications, but they were too young. They didn't have yet enough graduates. And this
Hmm.
year, well, the DICES, Monsoni's DICES Foundation lists a lot of schools that are doing this. And I said, can we list them also? We'll say they come from you, but because this way there'll be one location where you can go and look and see all the schools that are doing this kind of work, all the early career people who are struggling to do this kind of work, all the established organizations that are doing this kind of work. So it'll be an information source. And we even are building an AI system to make it easy to find them because, um, it's easy to have all the information in one place, but it's often hard to find the thing you're looking for. And usually there's keyword searches, and that's hard. But the nice thing about the large language models, if you can just describe the concept of what you're searching for, it can find it in the database. So
Hmm.
we're trying to do all of those things. We're trying to build up. And the next conference, in fact, will be in Singapore in November, which is, again, because we want to make sure people know this is an international thing, not an American thing.
Hmm. That's great. That's great. Um, so speaking of everything, I hosted a call on it for a different group earlier in the week with the director of the Wayback Machine at the Internet Archive, talking
Yes.
about, persistence of information and, the intersection of AI being able to find the things that are in the archive. So it's pretty interesting, right? Because automatically meta tagging some of that stuff and making it available is a good thing. It's not really organized in a knowledge graph yet, but there's potential.
We
There's
don't have
potential.
no more meta tags. They're not
Yeah.
necessary.
Well, that's right. I mean, you
You,
wouldn't
you know
need it, but I'm just,
FAQs, which are usually fake because people make up the question. But even
yeah,
if one of them would have the exact answer to the question that you have, almost never can you find it.
yeah,
And so I believe
yeah,
FAQs are dead because they're large language models.
yeah. I would add that, you know, apropos of the people that you said had recently departed their, you know, previous positions, there's going to be a big need for a lot of rapid prototyping, right? Because the existing ways that we're doing things are rapidly changing. Uh, I'm not going to put a judgment on good or bad, but a lot of capabilities are disappearing for a variety of reasons. So we're going to have to rapid prototype new ways to do what we want to accomplish.
Yes, but and
Okay.
the but is, or maybe I should be more positive. Yes, and
Well,
that's
that's
the
good improv.
yeah, that's the good improv thing that designers are taught to do. That when you're working in communities, one of the hardest thing is getting the buy-in from the community because
Mhm.
they all need a better sewer system or cleaner water or more electric power or
Mhm.
better health system. Everybody agrees, but they will disagree about exactly what they want and where it should be placed and what it should do exactly. And it takes a long time to develop that kind of a buy-in from everybody. But unless you have buy-in, it's not going to succeed. And that's something that should not be rushed. So yes, we could maybe do rapid prototyping to show them what it's going to look like, but they'll all agree that's nice, but you're going to run the transmission line or the sewer line under my house, so you're gonna have to make me move my house, or you destroy the street, or you're gonna do this, that, or
Mhm.
the other. They don't like that, and actually for good reason. But nonetheless, that's what will have to happen.
Yeah. Well, maybe you do it with them. That one of the cases that
Exactly
was
the
written
point.
up
It has
about
to be
me was,
done. Yes.
include the people who are going to have to either provide resources or might have permission to say no, and involve them.
No, no, it's stronger than that.
It's
It's
all keep going.
we say we want them to include us. So the designs have to be done by the people and with the people, and that we are simply advisors when they ask us for help. One of the reasons they might need us is because they know the problems they face and they attack the symptoms. But to attack the underlying causes is much more difficult and expensive, and maybe usually it involves government and therefore politics. And that's where the design community from the area can be very, very valuable in helping the larger scope.
Yeah. I suppose I didn't state my case. Well, I was talking about constituencies and customers in addition to, just people in the organization, right? Listening is an important skill to have. That's all
That's
I'm
of
saying.
course that's a fundamental part of the human set.
100%. 100%. Okay. I have done what we usually do is I've had a little bit of a conversation with you. Is there anything that we haven't unpacked that we need to before we open up to some of the other people that are joining us today in
I
our audience?
recognize the names and some of the people
Yeah,
there.
it's a
So,
good audience. It's a
but
good episode.
yeah, I'm sure there's something we missed, but let's open it up.
All right. Well, who has a thought question? And if you don't ask, I'm going to call on you. First, let's start with Mike McGuire, my co-host. Mike, jump in. Glad to have Don with us today.
Happy to do it. Don, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to reading the new book. Um, Question from me, and it's actually one I've had posted for a while, and one of our colleagues who couldn't make the call today kind of framed it similarly, which is, how do you feel about the kind of the depth and pervasiveness of good UX design? We see it a lot, but do you see, a consistent adoption? Are you feeling positive about that in general?
No. It's
Because we see so much bad, in our daily
UX.
lives
Yes,
or
UX
experience.
design has actually the user experience design. First of all, the term has been badly misused. I intended it to mean making life filled with more positive experiences, everything from the environment you're sitting in, from if you're buying a product, from how you discover it and how you buy it and how you set it up and how people help you. And instead, today it means building a website or an app.
Mhm.
So actually, I'm dropping the user. I'm saying I want to. It's all about experience design, and it has become now more embedded in many major companies. So it's the use of good design has improved, has increased dramatically,
Mhm.
but as fast as it improves, new companies and new entries and new startups come in who say, "Oh yeah, we understand that stuff, but we can't afford it." And off they go, and we get the horrible things. On top of that, today our software is riddled with difficulties because there are the bad guys and the good guys, and the bad guys are, there are so many problems with security and privacy
Mhm.
that our software gets more and more complex. Just logging in is very complex. One-factor login, two-factor login, biometric login. Um, no, you can't use that password. It's too simple, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just getting more and more difficult. And my life is spent, I feel I spent half my life simply updating and maintaining my equipment. And so that isn't good. And and some of it comes from really good designers because we're stuck with the fact that somebody found a new way to break into your system. And so we have to now introduce new stuff to prevent that. And invariably, I may have spent hours setting up everything to be just perfect the way I like it. And now I get a new update and oops, what happened? It's all gone. I have to reset it up again. It's also the case that with these large displays, I have two huge displays in front of me, and I carefully set up all the windows and everything the way I like it. And Zoom now gives me a second window so I can see who's speaking. Unfortunately, that shows my picture right now. But it means that when I look here, you think I'm looking at you. I'm just looking at whoever is speaking. And I have this other screen where I have the rest of you there. But every time I turn off my machine, I have to reset it again. So I think the technology has gotten worse and worse and worse. And it's kind of like large companies. They're really great when they start, but as they become larger and larger, bureaucracy of necessity in order to synchronize the work sets in, and pretty soon it's really hard. That's why startups, with small startups, can actually do things that the very same people in the large company couldn't do. So they quit and did it. And then if the large company is smart, they'll buy the company back and bring it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was, two quick stories. I remember when one of my friends got hired to run design for Salesforce, came in from Google, and it was because they hadn't met a feature they didn't like, right? And it had become so feature rich that people were saying that they couldn't use it anymore, right? And that, it was like, please come in and simplify, the way that people, use this. Similarly, for our friends, at SAP, right, where Hasso Plattner, I don't want to tell you how many stories I've had in open discussions where the executive from SAP would ask somebody that's going through an installation, all right, so how painful is it, right? Because, the on-prem stuff for SAP is notoriously painful, right? The transition. They're making some progress, but they should go back to the founder's investment. They should, SAP should spend a little bit more time at the D schools.
Well, no,
Right?
that's not the problem, because I was a good friend of the chief design officer and the major senior people at SAP, the one in
Uh-huh.
Palo Alto. They've
Yeah.
all left now, by the way. They work for JC Morgan now.
Okay.
But they had done wonderful work, but it's really hard with these large systems. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you two examples. One of them is I was asked to consult for another one of these big database companies. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was talking to them all, and I had them, I say, let's actually, I want you to watch and see how you people use your system. So I asked my host, I said, look, you've organized this and you have all this food, etc. So obviously you've paid for it and now you want to get your money back, right? And she
Mm-hmm.
said, yes. Well, yes, I want you to sign in and just fill out the forms, get your money back. So we're sitting in the headquarters of this company, and so she sits down and opens it up, and there's a pull down list to say where you were located, which branch of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out the headquarters wasn't on the pull down list, and and she kept going and going, and she finally gave up. And she said, this isn't the latest version of the software. And I said, what? How come you're not using the latest version of the software? She said,
Mm-hmm.
do you know how hard it is to update the software? And I say, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't that be telling you something about what your customers are experiencing?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but look, the world, the United States has lots of medical systems to keep track of the records, and the largest one is a group called Epic, and it's pretty horrible in many ways. And it was because it was started many, many years ago by a nurse, and it was started to help in the insurance payments. And it was very valuable and useful, but as physicians wanted to use it and more medical records were put in, that's not what it was originally built for. And so they're improving it. But we once brought one of the vice presidents of I don't remember whether it was a research or a software, to talk to us at University of California, San Diego, where I was at the time. And the first thing he said is, please don't tell me how bad our system is. First of all, we know it. Second of all, my wife is a physician, and every day she comes home and complains about the system. And pointed out simply that it's such a large, complex system that it's almost impossible to make improvements. And then, of course, to get them implemented. And I've experienced that at Apple, where we had a really bad memory allocation system in our software, horrible, filled with errors and so on. And all the software people were embarrassed by it, and they finally convinced the executives that they should change it. So they built one that was smaller, faster, more accurate. It was complete, and they installed it, and guess what? People's applications failed because the companies knew all the bugs that were there, and so they had workarounds. And now we put in the perfect software, and the workarounds didn't work. And we had to go and put back the bad software.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult job as you get larger and larger and larger, because the fundamental change has to come from the underlying architecture, and that's very difficult to change.
Understood. So let me call on some folks. Tim Beharan, any thoughts for Don today?
Don, it's good to see you again. You and I have met multiple times over the years.
Hi, Tim. Yes.
I think first in at the multimedia conference with Dr. Greenberg and John Scully in 1992. And then I was working on a project with Apple, and they asked me to come and meet with you, and you were at Apple. And we had a wonderful discussion on user interfaces and some of the stuff you were doing. Well, my question a little bit, I've read most of your books, and I understand, especially all of the stuff you've done on the physical user interfaces and the physical design. At what point in your career did you start thinking about the social impact and some of these other things that's now in the new book? Is this something that's been in your mind a long time, and you now just and the new book is expressing it, or had you factored in some of the societal impacts of design in the same context of what you have in the new book? I haven't read the new book yet, so I may be surmising a little bit more than is there. But I'm just interested about your journey.
I think I've sort of been noting it all along, but it's only recently that I really became specifically concerned about it. The last job I had was to set up a design group at UC San Diego. We called it the Design Lab, and there, some of the faculty were much more vehement than I was about how bad we were treating minority groups in particular, but disadvantaged groups of all sorts. And that was the beginning of my education. And when the Black Lives Matter movement started, I also spent a lot of time trying to work with the groups, those groups. But I didn't know what I should do about it or what I could do about it. And if you look in the new book, I don't address that specifically, but I tried to change the whole tone of the way we approach these issues. What I did in the new book, is I thought I would discuss the problems in the world, and I decided no, because those are actually well understood, and I didn't think I could add anything, nor did I think I could add anything about the problems of discrimination of all sorts that pervades the world. Because not that I didn't agree, but that I didn't think that I could add anything to the argument. Second, I thought I would talk about solutions, but I found that basically there's lots of really good solutions out there. The problem was they weren't being done. So I decided that maybe the real issue there is human behavior. And because I was trained as an electrical engineer, I have a PhD in psychology, I was an industry executive, I understand quite a bit about the world, and I've even testified before the FCC in order to get the first Wi-Fi ban, in order to help get the high definition television standards. And I used to tour the floors of Congress, talking to the representatives and to their staff. Their staff are more important, actually. So I thought I was beginning to understand the world, and that's what I wrote about. And the worst part about the world, as I think I said, is the economic structure that sometimes controls all these behaviors. But there's also biases. Every culture grows up thinking it's natural and all the stuff around them is unnatural. And there's even an archaeological sorry, anthropological finding that if two cultures grow up right next to each other, you'd think they would become similar because they have the same issues, the same problems, they intermarry, etc. No, actually, they try to differentiate themselves, and so they end up with completely different cultures deliberately, simply to distinguish one from the other. So human behavior is incredibly complex. So I do try to cover that in part, but that isn't the major theme of the book. The major theme are the topics I thought I could introduce a new perspective on. Not new knowledge, but a new way of viewing things, which maybe makes it easier to make changes. But it's been a slow, gradual. I was attacked before I published the book by people who thought that how could Don Norman look at all the nasty things he said in the past, and they either made up some or they resurrected some that I made 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm trying to say, yeah, I did say that, and I was wrong. And I learned with past. Isn't that permissible? And evidently it turns out it's not.
Tim,
Well,
did
thank
that
you.
help?
I'm anxious to read the new book.
All right.
I'm
Thanks,
anxious.
Tim.
Yes.
Greatly appreciate it. Doug Hoolan, you had some thoughts that you put into chat. Join us.
Yes. Unfortunately, Dr. Harvey Castro is not on this call. I actually sent him a WhatsApp. He's actually does consult. He's an ER doctor by training and has written 25 books on AI and healthcare, and he's a consultant from the government of Singapore on AI and healthcare. And so I see that your event is coming up in Singapore. So I'll let him know about your event. And
Not only that, but I just went to, I was the closing keynote speaker at a 2-day conference at Sharp Hospital in San Diego, which is the largest hospital system in San Diego. And they have bought 1,000 of the Apple Vision Pro. And I spent a full day before the conference playing with it. And I was very impressed with how they have overcome some of the traditional problems with superposition of, outside information onto what you're seeing. They solve it because you don't actually see the world. You think you're seeing the world. And they and I think that's going to be very important. It may be a breakthrough application. It's too expensive for the home, but in medicine, 1,000 of them is $5 million. All right, that's actually cheap for this kind of equipment.
Actually, speaking of San Diego, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and Dr. Castro will be there speaking on a summit. They do it every year in San Diego on the future of healthcare. Dr. Kraft is the one who organizes it. I don't know if you're familiar with that event.
No, I used to be involved when I was at UCSD through their medical system, and but I retired from that one, my 5th retirement. I retired in 2020. But it turns out that the person I look across the street there, the person who lives there is an anesthesiologist at Sharp. And so he introduced me to his surgeon, and his surgeon turns out to be a major figure in the research labs at Sharp. And that's how I got there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your book. I used to work for Motorola, or excuse me, Nokia. Well, I didn't work for Motorola, but Nokia Bell Labs, and talked to their human factors engineering group on autonomous vehicle technology. I'm an engineer, electrical engineer by training as well. But my focus now is on healthcare. I actually collaborate with Dr. Castro. And so this is my question to you is, how much do you talk about healthcare and AI and how your view of the world can be influenced by the health of the world, of humanity and human-centered design for around healthcare.
Actually, I don't think I covered healthcare in the book. I've done a lot of work in healthcare. I've been on a number of National Academy committees, for example, investigating healthcare. I've been to hospitals all across the United States and actually to many hospitals in India. And India had some of the best hospitals I've ever seen, better than many of the ones in the United States, and also some of the worst. And so I've done a lot of work in healthcare, but I don't think it's in the book. Because
Okay.
the book is already very, very thick. So
Yeah, exactly. You have to that. So what like if you had one takeaway on design thinking, I know you did a summary. What would be your one takeaway?
it's really important to understand the system that we're working in. And this, in the design of everyday things, I talk about a system of you trying to develop an app for your cell phone. You have to realize it's on the phone. You have to realize it's connected through some sort of network to other sources of information, and that system has to be taken into account. Today, I say that's not enough. Uh, in healthcare, for example, there was a big emphasis at my university that we have to make the patients feel better, and they wanted to have patient experience was the major thing. And I tried to tell them, no, please don't focus on the patients. You have to make sure everybody has a good experience, like the staff, the nurses, the technicians, even the people who at the doorway and the people who do the parking of the cars. Everybody has to have that experience, or else you won't have it. And they thought I was stupid, I guess. But so they tried to emphasize the patients, and what that did was it demoralized the nurses and it demoralized the physicians, and it made matters worse. So
Yeah.
looking at the whole system is critically important to understand how everything has to fit together. And Sharp was different, by the way. Sharp has actually implemented all of this. It's considered the third best healthcare system in San Diego, but the competition is pretty severe. The Scripps Clinic is considered number one, and UCSD are the first two. But because those are both huge teaching hospitals and research hospitals. But it's the ability to look at the entire system that is usually missed. Nurses are always interrupted very quickly, and so the computer systems aren't designed that way, because in a computer system for privacy, if you turn away for 30 seconds or something, it logs you off, and then they have to remember where they were. So I've watched nurses write the information on their hands, so when they got interrupted and logged off, they could remember it. And that's crazy. But the interruptions are often necessary because people complained about the interruptions, but when I tried to look at the cause of the interruptions, there was some other person, like a physician maybe, needed some critical information, and the nurse was the one who had just taken care of the patient and so wanted to ask the nurse something. But in doing that, his work was interrupted because he didn't have the information, but then he had to interrupt the other person to get it. And it's a very complex, really difficult problem to approach.
Yeah. Mark Prinsky is going to ask our next question. I'll just say, Don, I was very impressed with a study that we did at the University of South Carolina medical system in Greenville, Spartanburg, where rather than waiting for their internships for the first time in a hospital, doctors and nurses were actually training together in their curriculum, right? That they were, the nurses were doing the wellness environment and doctors were learning their interventions, but they were coordinated in terms of, coming up through their program. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, the nurses were always considered second-class citizens in the medical world. It's a caste system. But fortunately, people are now recognizing nurses are critical. They often have knowledge that the physicians do not. And so they're now starting to be treated as equal.
Yeah, the nurses understand what the patient is going through end to end, where the doctors are a little bit more intermittent, right? And like I said, wellness.
Well, but more than that, because then they get a good medical education too. And the surgeon who invited me to talk at Sharp points out that he couldn't work without his surgical nurse, because she understands the operation that he is doing as well as he does, which means that whenever he encounters a problem or something and then needs a special tool, she already has it in her hand, ready to hand it to him.
Absolutely. Mark, jump in.
Hi, Don. We met last, I think, at Fire at one point.
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago, and good luck congratulations on everything you've done since. I'm really interested in two things. One is the relationship between what you're doing, the design in the world and everything, and then nature. And nature, it does its own design and has its own ways of doing that. And so what you used the word artificial earlier to sort of think about how we design this. But so that's one question. But the real question is the what we all keep coming back to is human behavior. And that is always the problem. And it is always the thing that we have to deal with. We know it's both good and it's bad and it's all this stuff. What about designing humanity, redesigning humanity? We're in a stage where we now can manipulate genes, where we know a whole lot more, and maybe not in the next year or two. But if we design better humans, perhaps, and that's obviously a fraught term, but what have you thought about that area of design at all?
People have thought about it. I think it's very dangerous. First of all, we clearly don't know enough about human biology. I mean, one of the things I learned not long ago, about 5 years ago, was the complexity of the single individual cell.
Mm-hmm.
Don't understand how a cell works. And inside of it, I thought the cell was, the basic unit. No. Inside the cell, there are, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of its own components, some of which seem to have some intelligence in doing things. We have to be very careful. And so what nature, though, first of all, we are trying to use some things from nature. Biomimicry is the area of design, because we build buildings today ignoring nature. We assume we have huge amounts of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, good water, full electricity, and that's often false. And so we build buildings, though, with the architects, the windows are facing in all directions, the sun pours in the summer, making it hotter, and the heat pours out in the winter, making it colder. There are old ways of building which use natural heating and natural cooling that work really, really well. Some architects are starting to redo it. And also nature has this cycle that almost everything gets reused. So that has been codified in something called the circular economy, that in manufacturing, we want to use parts in a way that we can reuse them, we refurnish them, and anything that we can't be reused can be recycled, being truly recycled, like melted down and cast into new materials or used in new products. That's also very important. But I think the way to redo humanity is through education and not through nature. Nature, don't forget, doesn't mind killing millions and millions of animals as it's fumbling its way towards betterness. And whole species die in nature. And we don't want that. So that, yes, we might be able to reproduce evolution, but the cost will be very, very high. So I think education is a better way. And our educational system is horrible. We still teach the way that people have taught for thousands of years through lectures, which is the worst way to learn. Lectures are really good at motivating. Lectures are very good at pulling things together, but it's not a good way to learn things. I don't like STEM education. I'm opposed to it, even though I'm highly educated in S, T, E, and M. Notice there's nothing about people in that. Yet why do we have STEM? It's in part to build things and for societies and people. Moreover, it emphasizes the specialties. S is taught separately than T, than E, than M. And S, what does S mean? Science? How many different sciences are there? Engineering? How many fields of engineering? And even in engineering, just take computer science as an example. People in theoretical computer science and people in software engineering, they don't even understand one another. The fields are so specialized. We have to have more generalists, but the reward structure in universities means it's almost impossible for a generalist to get promoted. On top of that, because the promotion today is by metrics. So one of the big things in my book is how we measure everything, including things that can't be measured. So we measure something else and we say, well, that's related to what we want. And then pretty soon you forget that what you're measuring isn't what you care about. So instead of measuring the quality of a person's work and the quality of their teaching, we measure how many papers they publish in highly refereed journals. The number. Nobody asks about whether they're important or not. And there's more and more crap being published in these journals. The conferences used to be where senior people would explain big points. Today is all about students giving papers in the conferences because it's the only way they can get jobs is to show they have given papers. And so the whole system is just all fucked up.
All right. Thank you, Don. Appreciate your candor. And Kyle Shannon, jump in, my friend.
Hey Don, how are you? We actually collaborated back in 1999. I was chief creative officer at agency.com, and we created a thing called the Immersibility Index. I don't know if you remember that. I found it on the Wayback Machine, so I put it in the chat there. But,
Yes.
you know what you were just talking about, what we talked about with the Immersibility Index was as people were figuring out how to design websites, they were doing it from their, single point of view. So technologists were making highly functional websites that weren't usable, and designers were making really beautiful websites that didn't do anything. And so the idea of the Immersibility Index was to look at web design holistically, look at it as a complex system and with intention. So it's great to see you again, and it's really exciting to hear that you've expanded that thinking, to the world, because yeah, we need it. And what I'm heartened by, what I'm excited about right now, I think that AI is going to democratize access to the skills, and it is actually going to amplify the value of the generalist. I'm calling the era that we're entering revenge of the liberal arts major, because I think that generalists are going to be able to be incredibly powerful and be required as AI democratizes a lot of the individual skills. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts on that.
Actually, while you were talking, I looked you up in my records. We first started talking in 2005. The last time we talked, though, was 2012.
Wow, that's so cool.
That diversion to tell you what I just forgot what I was going to say.
Just generalists, AI democratizing skills.
Here's one thing I point out. I say, look, we really have to understand people. So where do you go to learn about people? And I say, don't go to psychologists, don't go to anthropologists, don't go to sociologists. I have a PhD in psychology. You know what I'm an expert in? How the ear works. If you understand people, you should go to the humanities. Look at a journalist or look at someone who writes fiction. If you write fiction, you better be a really good observer of people, because the people you describe have to feel real to the reader. So I think the humanities are actually the most important field, especially as AI is going to take over a lot of the underlying technology.
Yep.
How to use it properly is going to be, that's where the humanities teaches us. And that's what I think that we shouldn't teach in courses, we should teach in projects, because a project requires you to bring together different disciplines who share the work and do things together. And people might be surprised that the people in the humanities actually will provide value. Except what's the hardest part about doing this is getting the people to work together and respect one another's disciplines. Even today, when you bring together in courses the MBA students and the engineering students and the design students, the MBAs always assume that they're in charge, and the engineers think that they're the most important, and designers are left out. And the people who teach this well say it takes a few months before they get it to the point where everybody respects what the contributions of the other people, and they no longer think anyone's really in charge, or maybe there's a project manager. But I've seen in companies, some of the best project managers were trained in who knows what, literature, in the humanities, because their skill is getting people to work together.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. And you know,
Good to
the formation, Kyle, runs quite a few groups that are related to generative AI, and uh, he is good at helping people frame up asking, better questions, as we say in content evolution, because, that broader, view, the T across the T type personality, is able to form better questions in many.
But it's not about, because that's right. To use, I've had people tell me they haven't used any of the new AIs because they're not I don't understand technology, they tell me.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
give an example and say, it's not about understanding technology,
Exactly.
about understanding the work. I'm a fan of this, but don't forget what we are doing, what we see today is just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's just become popular and so on. And even the people who developed it don't understand it well. Because it's very complex. It's all about weights, millions, trillions of weights. I'm also, as an aside, one of my early postdocs who, when I first brought him in cognitive science, and I remember I was giving this little talk and he interrupted me and told me I was wrong. Um, and I like it when people tell me I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, I want to know and change. Well, I was talking about perceptrons, and he said that was out of date. And so what happened was he and my colleague, Dave Rumelhart, started to work on this concept. And I was trying to develop the field now called human-computer interaction, so I didn't do that. But they invented neural networks. They really did in my laboratory, I like to say. And so that person just got the Nobel Prize for neural networks, Jeff Hinton.
Right.
It's been interesting.
Amazing. I'm gonna run see it.
So we're at the top of the hour. We have one more person, and then we're going to wrap. Suzanne, we're delighted to have you with us. Anything that you want to say or ask Don?
Yeah, Dawn, thank you for this presentation. I'm well into your book. I think it's outstanding. I particularly really appreciate your philosophy of quality over monetary value. Throwing good money after bad, and you address that economically. I appreciate that so much. My question is, on your upcoming travels, is there a specific problem that you might be solving that you could briefly talk about? I'm fascinated.
No, because we don't ask for, what I've been fascinated by is the variety of problems that people are addressing that I never even thought of, that in the DNDA, Don Norman Design Award program. And this made me kind of a generalist in looking at the world's problems. And right now, most of my work seems to be by accident, seems to be in India. The Indians are because Indians are developing all sorts of new schools, non-government schools, and they're actually called deeded schools, which the government thought meant you were a second-class school because you're not one of us. But as far as I can tell, it's a mark of superiority. They can teach in new ways, and they're often very well funded because it's the rich people give back, and they often funded these schools. And so I've seen a lot of the issues in India, and some of the prize winners came from India, but some of them came from the United States, and some came from Tijuana, just across the border. But I mean, it's amazing. At Ghana, one of the prizes was simply an organization that teaches people with handicaps how to solve their problems. They teach them technology, but the technology necessary to solve, say, impaired vision or impaired use of their arms and legs and so on. In India, one of was palliative care, where the village would all gather around people and sing and cheer them up, and actually managed to, in many ways, restore one person who was very, very depressed, simply because the whole village was supportive. It took about 5 or so years, but nonetheless, the person was able to then function again. And the sort of activities are just a wide variety. And so if you ask me what I'm focused on, it's on the ability of people when they gather around to do wonderfully great things.
Suzanne, thanks for that question. And Don, greatly appreciate you being with us today. Travel safe. And again, the start of this was a little more clumsy than I would have thought. I'm preparing to depart in a half an hour for a celebration of life, and I'm a little bit distracted, right? For, friends of the family. So with that said, we always appreciate what you do, and your evolution is, I think, is remarkable. And what can we do to help? Let's end here. All right. What do you need right now that our community can help with?
Well, right now we're suffering like many startups, and actually Kevin and I have spent some time talking about this lack of funds, because we don't have any full-time employees, and now with so many people being let go in our U.S. government, that makes they're all seeking funds, and so that makes it even harder. And that's just difficult. And we need enough funding that we can hire some full-time people, and therefore we can expand the activities primarily by partnering. But all of our partners are also searching for money. It's difficult all around the world. Even the Aga Khan Foundation, which the Aga Khan group is very, very wealthy, but the foundation doesn't have enough money to do most of the jobs it does. It has to find partners. So that's the major problem that we and other nonprofits are facing.
Well, we'll keep our eyes and ears out for the right opportunity to connect agendas and resources.
By the way, that's the problem when the students are so excited when they hear my lectures or read my books or other things, and they say, where can we do this work? And I have to say, I don't know. Because again, because of this funding issues, and like the United States just cut off one of the major sources of funding for this kind of positive societal work.
Well, again,
Anyway,
I think that there's
why don't we end up on a positive note?
No, we
Actually,
should. I have optimism that you will find that funding, right, for the mission that you've selected, because it has merit, and there will be, the right organizations will appear. Well, but you can't get there if you don't ask. So we're asking. We asked and answered. Let's put it out there and see whether we can make the right connections for what you're looking for. And everyone, thanks for being with us for this edition of Content Evolution New World. We will be with you next week. And Don, again, travel safe, do well, and we're with you. We want design to help humanity.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everybody else, all my old friends. Wow.
Yeah. And best to Julie.
Oh, my wife. Yes.
Yes, please. She another great Norman on the planet, right? What can I say? She's really good. Cheers.
Bye.
Take care.